Welcome to Real Vision Crypto versus the Defiant. This is our weekly crypto show where we merge the worlds of TradFi, Wall Street, and DeFi, which is where us young guns come from. Today, joining me are Elaine Ly and Camilla Russo from the Defiant. And what a week it's been with so much news around regulations, so much news around Mark Zuckerberg and his Zuckerverse and Meta and all of that stuff. Camilla, I know you've been keeping an eye out on stablecoins in particular. Elaine, are there any stories that have been grabbing you, particularly this last week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Meta, I have lost sleep over that. This 26-page report coming from the US Treasury, that's really long, and I can't even have a highlighter enough to go through it. But what I know of it is basically, it's literally called Report on Stablecoins. It's 26 pages long, and basically it's a research from a bunch of people in the financial industry, academics, can't say the word because it's 7 a.m. over here in San Francisco, and advocacy groups. And then, so from what I read, it's just basically guidance that clearly calls for Congress to put out new laws that would limit who can issue stablecoins. And then this President Workings Group report is meant to, it's like when school gives you an assignment and it's going to hit all these 26 pages of what it needs to do next has to go to literally everyone in the regulatory crypto world. So that includes the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, the Securities Exchange Commission, and CFTC, which is Commodities Futures Trading Commission. So every major US regulatory board, this report is for them. Is that how you guys see it?
Yeah, it's a good point. And the fact that it's so difficult to explain gives you a sense of how big an issue this is and how many bodies there are feeding into it. Because I think what you're seeing here is that stablecoins are starting to be perceived as a risk to a bunch of things. But actually in the report itself, it's quite fluffy how they actually articulate those risks. They call it the potential for destabilizing runs, disruptions in the payment system, and concentration of economic power. And so they, as usual, they throw up this idea of protecting investors, protecting people's money. So they're worried that if you consider a stablecoin a bit like deposits in the bank, there could be a run on those deposits and people could be left without access to funds. They're worried about payment system risk. So they want stablecoin issuers to be to actually have the coins backed by something that they can actually prove. And that sounds like it should be a really easy thing to do, but historically stablecoins in crypto have not been so good at doing that. They raise this idea of commercial paper, which is, just debt sitting on the balance sheet. Whereas I think what everybody wants to see is one stablecoin dollar equals one actual dollar that's deposited in a bank. And there should be an attestation report that can actually point to that and guarantee that it exists. And I'll come back to USDC because, interestingly enough, as a project that is regulated in New York, they weren't, in fact, backed one-to-one by dollars. They now are. And then they're also talking about the systemic risk and concentration of economic power. They want interoperability among stablecoins. And there are sort of certain restrictions they want to impose over those who offer custody of these things. But basically, the long and short of it is, they want stablecoin issuers to be regulated like a bank. So all the regulations that apply to banks, they want to apply them to stablecoin issuers. And fundamentally, they want to separate commercial entities from stablecoins, which brings up the specter of DM and Facebook, formerly Facebook's own cryptocurrency. But Camilla, this hits right at the heart of decentralized finance. Without stablecoins, it'd be very hard to imagine DeFi. So what's your take on all of this?
I think, well, first to point out that the fact that, U.S. Regulators and policymakers are just urging everyone to come to the table and enact regulations specifically for stablecoins, it tells you how big of a sector these cryptocurrencies have become, to the point of, I think, really highlighting to, what for some U.S. Policymakers may seem like a risk to the U.S. dollar. I think this is kind of where this urgency is coming from. If there's something that can be used to replace the US dollar with potentially kind of decentralized stablecoins, I think the US wants to kind of anchor stablecoins to the dollar, and so like requiring that stablecoins should be backed by actual fiat US dollars, and if not, they're kind of outside of the law. So I think that's kind of an important point. I think that's maybe where this regulation is getting at. It's like, okay, like assuming that stablecoins are here to stay, let's regulate them and let's take them to our court and make them be backed by fiat currency, so that fiat doesn't like lose its legitimacy. I think it makes sense from the standpoint of the US. Of course, they want to safeguard the value of the dollar. And I think if there's a stablecoin that is, saying that they are backed by one-to-one by US dollars, I think it makes sense that they should be able to prove it. And if there's regulators, who want to make sure that this is happening to protect investors, it shouldn't be an issue. But I also think there should be alternative stablecoins. I think we talked about this in our previous episode. I think this is where things get more interesting to me. The fact that DeFi is creating stablecoins that are not backed by fiat currencies, that are backed by crypto, that are using kind of algorithms and things outside of the traditional financial system to create these stable means of exchange. I think that's exciting, because that kind of are paving the way to this new financial system that is actually an alternative to the current one.
Well, that's a fair point, because stablecoins as a sector, stable doesn't necessarily mean backed by the US dollar. It can be backed by anything as long as its value can be maintained at a certain point. And we have algorithmic stablecoins in DeFi, which are these highly complex and very interesting pieces of financial engineering that allow us to maintain that without having to be backed one-to-one by an asset, which sounds like witchcraft. But these experiments are being kind of housed and aired in public, and people are depositing funds into them, and sometimes they get horribly burned by it. And that's part of the learning process. But there are alternatives. And of course, if you think about the US dollar as an asset of value, but it's losing value all the time, it's highly inflationary. So does that make it a stable coin if it's backed one-to-one by a US dollar? And I think that's the argument, the philosophical argument that DeFi is putting forward, is that we can do better than that. And so we should, because there is there's a burden on us to prove that there is a different type of financial system that we can put together. And there are interesting experiments being done.
Yeah. So on that note, like, I know the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was basically in the summer sounding the alarm, so to speak, on stablecoins, noting that she said the need to act quickly to ensure there is an appropriate US regulatory framework in place. My question is, okay, this report has come out, this highly anticipated report, but how does it move forward from this? I mean, I know, for example, if people working in the space who are leaders in the space, they have to, move forward and ahead to talk about, DeFi regulation compliance, DeFi legality, DeFi democratization of everything. What is out of this report that they can move forward with? I think that is the big question. What I am finding that's really interesting is that people within like these governmental authority bodies, is the cryptocurrency companies are actually recognizing, who's doing what and who the big players are, and they are snapping them up to move them over to the crypto companies. I know, for example, I think FTX snapped up a guy called Mark Wetjen that I've read, and he basically served as commissioner on the CFTC during the Obama presidency. So that's reassuring that when they recognize who the crypto converts are within, on these boards, they actually snap them up into the crypto community. And his role is to basically lead public affair efforts, and that he is the head of policy and regulatory strategy. So I hope that, these people that they put into the crypto companies will actually spear that forward and ahead.
I think that's a really interesting point that you're raising. It seems like this year crypto has been kind of shaken awake that it needs to be part of just like the policy conversation, more than ever before. I think what really prompted this was the debate over the infrastructure bill. And this just like sprung everyone to action. Like crypto Twitter was on fire those like a couple of weeks. There were like lobbying groups that were formed around it, lobbying DAOs that were formed around it. Even, Ryan Selkis of Messari was saying that he wanted to run for like Senate or Congress. And and it was like this moment of awakening, like, okay, like regulators can really have a big impact on crypto. So, it's like the sector can't be blinded anymore. It needs to be kind of part of the discussion, and just like have its voice heard in both like lobbying groups, but also in as like a voting power. I think politicians and lawmakers are also realizing crypto is a voting issue now. Like people are going to vote for candidates according to what their position is on crypto, and I think that's really powerful. And hopefully, it can get crypto more kind of clear guidance, friendlier regulation.
But it still makes me sad. Like anything going through Congress will take years to actually officially become law. What I also found what's funny is I read something that senators are trying to make Capitol Hill accept cryptocurrency in vending machines and restaurants. So I hope that's
Ted Cruz, I think, right?
So I think that's a good one to make people understand and the use of crypto a little bit more versatile. Hopefully, to speak right on the grounds of where people make these decisions on how to regulate cryptocurrency.
Well, there's a couple of things to pick up on here. One of which is crypto companies have a lot of money, and they're actually, equipped to hire the very, very, very best people and pay them extremely well to fight in their corner. That's one thing. Secondly, we're seeing a convergence of a lot of different zeitgeists at the same time. So there's all this concern over big tech, but we're also seeing, countries like El Salvador adopt Bitcoin and playing out these experiments in real time and seeing the way that they actually function. But then you've got the likes of Michael Saylor saying, we are facing such massive inflationary problems that Bitcoin is our hedge and we're going to stand by it. And then gradually you're seeing more and more funds and banks starting to kind of go, okay, all right, we'll take a little bit of that. And then suddenly the floodgates are open and off we go. It's interesting you mentioned Congress because the report specifically urges Congress to take action. And it also kind of hidden in the language there, it says, well, we're pretty sure that you're going to do a terrible job of this and tie yourselves up in knots. So we're going to allow the different federal bodies to act if they need to, but we would much rather that Congress took this on and actually did it properly. But there's this kind of despairing language in there, which says, like, we know this is going to suck, but we just have to grit our teeth and get through it.
Yeah.
I talked about Circle, which is the company behind USDC. Maybe I mentioned Circle, maybe I didn't. Circle's a big player. Coinbase is one of the biggest players. They are the companies behind USDC. USDC has grown up to be the kind of regulated alternative to Tether, which is the biggest stablecoin by far. Tether has a horrible history, horribly checkered past in terms of what's on its balance sheet, the claims it's made. It's just toxic as hell. And USDC has been this kind of, well, we're the nice guys, we play right. But even they weren't playing right until earlier this month, or back in, when was it? It was in September, October. But they got subpoenaed by the SEC. And the SEC said, yeah, we need to see stuff and we need to see it right now. Off the back of that, we now have an attestation report from Circle, which says that they have $31.7 billion in cash and cash equivalents. Just let that number sink in for a second. $31.7 billion just sitting there in the bank. That's a lot of money to be sitting there.
Who got the money? Okay, well, very good.
But then you can start to think about, the issuers having that much on their balance sheets and how, they need to be regulated. That's a lot of money just sitting there. And so I think this is inevitable, but it's, 31.7 billion now. And we really feel like we're only kind of just tiptoeing into this era of digital currency.
What's really scary about that thought as well, and that number, is we spoke to Gary Tan, who's one of the early investors at Coinbase, and he literally said, I think it was Brian Armstrong who actually said this to him. It was Coinbase, which is currently $336 a pop. He said Coinbase is only functioning at 1% on the progress bar in my standards.
Yeah, I think, if you think about money, it touches every single human on the planet in some way, shape, or form. So we really are looking at something that affects literally the entire planet. And when you think about the scale of that, we're like barely in the foothills of all.
Which will bring us to our next topic, something that is also touching the lives of many other people this week.
Did you just hijack my segue?
I did.
You did.
I did.
So, yes. So as I mentioned before, caught up in the middle of these stablecoin recommendations was some language about divorcing stablecoin issuers from commercial entities. And this seemed to be a direct shot at Facebook, formerly known as Meta, formerly known as the Zuckerverse, now known as Meta, which is an anagram for tame, which is an anagram for team. Keep going as far as you want with that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls it a cancer, using the word metastasized to make her point. She thinks all of that sort of Facebook toxicity is a problem, but they, of course, have rebranded as Meta, bringing all of that with them into the metaverse. They've been talking about NFTs. They've been talking about their grand vision for an AR, VR version of the metaverse. Elaine, what is your take on the metaverse? Are you excited by it? Are you scared by it?
Man, so literally when this was announced, right, when, so to speak, the Mark Zuckerberg town hall that everybody tuned in a big tech company, I have lost sleep over this over the past week. I really have. And here's why. Let me tell you why. Because I'm scared at how much bigger Facebook will actually get from this, okay? But I'm also excited at the same time how everyone will now want to learn about the word metaverse. We at Real Vision have been talking about the metaverse for the past, somebody said 2 years, but I've only been with Real Vision a couple of months. So I'm going to say, 3 months. We're literally talking to some of the biggest leaders in the metaverse space. We're talking to PS Kicks, Peter Diamandis, Jamie Burke, Kevin Kelly, Matthew Ball, Michael Johnson. These people are just really big, heavy hitter names in the metaverse. Okay, so he has literally managed to hang the word metaverse, this word, onto 2.8 billion people around the world. This is the scale of making the word metaverse known to his network community. So, for example, I think people who are currently building the metaverse is currently
a good name for it, actually.
Metaverse. Yeah, I think people who are currently building it are like, oh my God, this is Facebook's next big game plan. So what does that mean for the crypto community? I mean, I've noticed that some people have realized that, look, you want to make a Web 0.3 that is, enables permissionless ownership of your own metaverse assets. So think about this. If Facebook gives you a metaverse, is that the only world that you're going to be in, the metaverse universe? So there's so much to talk about this. I don't know, man, but I have lost huge amounts of sleep over it because of how big this whole thing actually is.
Well, I know, Camilla, you don't give up your sleep easily. How have you thought about this?
I'm just very, very skeptical about the whole thing. It's so ironic and anti everything that Facebook has become and has built over the years. Facebook has become just the stereotypical closed walled, the corporation, mega corporation. basically the antithesis of what, you know, the actual metaverse wants is becoming. So, you know, Facebook has really become just like the poster child of like the Web2 closed, like big tech corporation that owns user data and profits off user data, and has us all kind of like as like just like you know, puppets in this like big system. So like literally the opposite of a system that has users actually owning their assets, owning their data. So for me, like to think that Facebook will actually give all that away, like give away all that power, and basically its business model, like its business model is to own their billions of users' data and profit from it and sell ads and, you know, sell analytics and so on. So I don't know. I don't really buy it. I don't buy that Facebook will all of a sudden say we're giving this all up. We're building in an open space. We're open sourcing our code. We're letting users retain control of their assets and their information. We're changing our entire business model. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's all just like a marketing stunt. Like they know that this is where things are going. So let's own it. Let's call ourselves Meta. Let's build some AR, like VR world. But from there to say, oh, in this world, like people are actually going to become owners, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the metaverse will be, you know, will continue to be built by crypto protocols and DAOs the way it's been done. And you know, I think it's good that Facebook is a huge global presence, and this just, you know, shines a light on what's happening on the metaverse, and will, you know, make people want to discover it and explore it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's sorry.
No, it'll provide choice. But I think that the real metaverse won't be built by Facebook.
Nice. So, and that brings me to talk about the metaverse companies that exist already. If we look at companies like Decentralized, Mana, which has increased over, I think it was peaking at plus 160%. And also you have Sandbox, who was, again, up, and Axie Infinity also up. And I just think, you know, that is a clear sign with people trying to like fund these metaverse companies as, oh shit, this is our chance to give almost a middle finger to Facebook and just rallying the troops, right?
Well, look, there's a couple of things to unpack here. Facebook is a, as we could call it, the Goliath. And what crypto's greatest story has always been the underdog story, Bitcoin against the banks, fighting for the plucky little guy. It actually helps us massively if we want to believe and build an open metaverse. It's massively helpful to have Meta, because it gives us something to not be, if that makes any sense. So Facebook can do whatever it wants to do. One of the things it does is it's a massive halo effect. It will open up the possibility of working within the metaverse to talented creators, designers, engineers, coders, whoever you want. And they may well find that that doesn't work for them and come to an open metaverse style system. But the open metaverse is already being built. The experience that Mark Zuckerberg wants to talk about, VR and AR, already exists on platforms like Somnium Space. You can put on a pair of goggles and go and explore a metaverse that is completely owned and built and run by a community. That exists already. So when Zuckerberg says we're a long way away from it, he's wrong. It actually exists already.
Here. You can even go to the Defiant headquarters on Somnium.
Exactly. We have embraced that from the get-go. And when you talk about the companies that are building the metaverse, the Defiant is actually one of those. We are building what is effectively a metaverse media company using Web3, and we talk about DeFi, but DeFi is really the engine that powers everything that will make up activities in the metaverse. And you can think of NFTs as the skin on the car, and then metaverse as the map. And it's really misleading to think of the metaverse as a place, as a destination, because it really, really isn't. It's actually much more akin to playing a video game where the world is around you and it spins around you. And we have this idea that we have to go to the big cities where all the work is, and that is our role as drones in the system. The metaverse recontextualizes all of that. However it's built to center everything around you. You own your value, and it travels with you wherever you go. And once you start thinking about the metaverse in that idea, then it doesn't really matter what Facebook's up to, because the concepts, the ideas, the interoperability of assets between different systems will mean that you can go wherever you want to go, wherever you're best entertained, wherever your friends are. And it might well be that you choose to go to that expensive nightclub that is Meta, that you know you're giving up your freedoms for, or you might decide you go, no, the way we travel to countries that we know are different to where we are now. It's, as Camilla said, it's choice. It's agency.
Beautiful. So Robin, it's worth us at the end of this video to take your metaverse space, and we'll post it in the link below this video. Same with Real Vision as well. We're on our metaverse spaces on crypto voxels. So let's offer people 2 of the metaverse spaces that they can visit after this video.
Thank you. Yes. Amazing. Well, we did a long video about the metaverse. I think it's becoming increasingly clear that what we do as a publishing company, as a media company, has enormous possibilities as a metaverse concept. And we are constantly asking ourselves, well, what does that look like? And how can we be a player within that? And still hold true to the values that we have, which is we don't want to shill stuff. We don't want to, cause people to FOMO into stuff. And that's perfectly possible within the metaverse. I'm very excited about it. And I'm also very bullish on the idea that Facebook has opened people's eyes to just thinking about the metaverse. Mm-hmm. I see it as a massive net positive, honestly, in the same way that I see that their stablecoin concept as a massive net positive. It has actually accelerated all this regulatory talk and allowed us to confront something which was inevitable anyway. So Facebook is really just pouring oil on the flame, and good for them, Excellent. You look at those videos of Mark Zuckerberg talking about his vision, and it's the most cringeworthy thing you have ever seen. It would take a really, 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 really low threshold, low taste human to find anything wholesome in that. And yet, here we are.
I love it. They actually replied to Raul on Twitter. So that was a fun one. No, it's good. I mean, look, I've even seen reaction from Gabby Dizon, who is one of the founders of Axie Infinity and Yield Guild. And, he just said, he leaves me with a really big picture in his tweet, which is the promise of Web3 is to give ownership to all the participants that make a network successful. Let's not F that up. Each person matters. And I thought that was really nice.
Well, Camilla's actually interviewed and done a podcast with Gabby. He's lovely. Yeah, we've had him on a few times.
Yeah. Also check out the What is the Metaverse video on our channel. Really, really nice overview of the future of the space. But I think like the takeaway is that it's not a long way away. Like it's here, it's getting built. We're covering it. We're using it. So I think that's what is mind-blowing about this space. Like we're talking about all these things like programmable money and loans that pay themselves, and just like digital like value and the metaverse and all these things that sound like science fiction. And what's crazy is that they're all here, and it's like it's such a privilege. I don't know. We're so lucky to be so early and seeing all this as it's being built. So
yeah, I feel the same way actually this week with all the content that we've been dealing with, just talking about the big tech space and how like technological advancements is just opening our eyes up to the exponential age. And that's something that we're basically racing and running every day to cover.
Well, it's interesting because I was just talking this week to a project that allows you to take out a loan on an NFT. And if you think about all the real estate, the assets that will exist in the metaverse, at least the open metaverse. So the autoglyphs, which are the project that followed CryptoPunks, there's very few of them, but they're these generated art pieces. The owner of that one took out a loan for $1.3 million, and it was underwritten by a DAO. So the DAO said, yeah, we'll underwrite this loan because we value that autoglyph. And if it all goes wrong and it defaults to us, then we'd be very happy to have it. That's wild. And that was completely decentralized. So I'm actually going to try and do something similar with an ape, a bored ape that I own, take out a loan on it and see where I can go.
Little, yeah.
But you don't.
What number is it, Robin?
I don't know, but it's got a cigar, so that's all that you need to know. No, but once you start thinking about that, the real estate in the metaverse and assets in the metaverse will be, key primitives in your financial universe and value creation and portability of value. It's wild, and we're, as Camilla said, we are literally building it on the fly as we go.
Yeah, it's like basically setting your foot, building your digital citizenship, and these words are not mine, they're Peter Diamandis, and just really just having your digital asset of what you own is such a status symbol nowadays. And we say this as NFT NYT is taking place in New York.
I think what's crazy is that like the fact that all of this is happening on these like global distributed networks that are built to transfer value, this is allowing like for everything to become finance. Like everything is becoming like the lines between what's finance and what's art and what's culture are all getting blurred. It's like right now, yeah, like Robin has this Bored Ape that in the past would have been just like a funny, Twitter avatar or whatever, but now he can take out a loan against it. So it's like now your like art is becoming finance and music is becoming finance, and it's like all the lines are getting blurred because like everything is being transacted on the same network. I think that's kind of the revolution that this thing is just now like starting to spark, and we're like just starting to see what like the consequences of that will be.
Well, you're absolutely right, because for the longest time, DeFi has been this really niche thing that very few people understand, but actually it's going to be the engine of everything. Yep. Literally everything. There's not a single thing that it can't touch and do something clever with. No, maybe we shouldn't do clever things with it all the time, but it's entirely possible. And some teenager will sit in their bedroom and hack something together over the weekend, and then within a week, it's $1 billion company. You can't even call it a company. It's just $1 billion thing. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And we're at risk of getting too excited about it. But when you see what's happening and how quickly it's happening, it's hard not to.
How can you not? Yeah.
So I think that's a very good place to wrap it up. And that kind of ties me up in knots, because I was thinking about the toxicity of the word meta now that Facebook has co-opted it as their own. And I was trying to think about how would I call the metaverse if it wasn't the metaverse? And I came up with something horrible. I'm going to share it with you now. Self-space.
Oh,
drop that in your thought fridge and keep it cool.
Yeah. I quite like it though.
Internal mechanism, clock, whatever you want to call it. You don't tell that to anyone. That's what you think. Self-sovereignty in a place, self-space.
I think it can grow into you. Yeah.
I'm available for weddings, bar mitzvahs, and funerals. Anyone?
Excellent. Really good conversation.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us, Elaine from Real Vision, and Camilla Russo, the Chief S at the Defiant. We will see you next time.